Welcome back. I'm going to show you in this video how we can go in and really bring a scene to life. This is my rain and the rain splash and a little bit of the fog scene going on. And if I come up here and click the play, I have sound effects, basically of rain, and if it goes off here, lightning and thunder. And the lightning and thunder is set to go off randomly, and we're going to talk about how to set this up. We're going to start by importing the files, showing you where they are, how to assemble them, how to get them ready to go, and then we're going to go in and we're going to construct a couple of sound cues, and then we're going to go in and we're going to use Blueprint to set it up so I have a flashing light that randomly goes on and off, that's followed by the random sound of thunder, and also the timing on every flash of lightning and every sound of thunder is completely random. So that's what we're going to set you up with on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and I'll be right back with the real file. Okay, so here we have the basic scene. I've removed all of the blueprint information and everything else, and we're going to go through and show you kind of what we have to do. Now I've added a sounds folder in here, and I've downloaded from Canvas or from the Google Drive, either way you'd like to get yours, a series of 7 sounds. There are 6 different thunder sounds and a rain sound. And what I did was I imported each of the 7 sounds, rain 01 and then thunder 01 through thunder 06. And then I basically just selected one, right click on it, go to create cue, and turned each one of them into a basic sound cue, which looks like this. It's a fairly easy thing to do. You just want to get them all set up so you have that. We're going to come back and we're going to control and add some other changes to these things later on. We're going to add some attenuation and some sound modulation effects in here a little bit later on. But for right now, that's kind of what we want to do on those. And you want to get them in here and get them all set up. Now, the one that I'm going to use right now is going to be the rain cue. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it in here, and I'll bring it up and set it in my scene. And then I'm going to go back and look at my sound cue. And I've already got an attenuation added into this one. And you're going to want to do the same thing. You're going to want to take that and add an attenuation into it. And the way that I set this up was I need the rain to sound everywhere. So what I did was I set up a radius of 5,000. And I have my fall off is set above that. It doesn't really matter. I guess I can set that to now I'll leave it at that. But it's going to fall off after that. But 5,000 is big enough to cover the entire world. This is about a 4,400 square unit world, so I've got my sound set for 5,000, and that means anywhere that I happen to go in this level, I am going to hear the sound play. So click on this and go cue, and I think sometimes the program I'm using to record this interferes with sound, and I think it's doing it at this point right here. So I've got that and got it in my world. And now if I go in, I've got my fog, and I think you can hear the sound of the rain in the distance, and it's kind of, the microphone picks it up, I'm pretty sure. But if you can't hear it, there is some sound coming through on that, and that's fine. I want it to be kind of subtle. It's not too loud. It's a gentle rain sound, and everything is set up and ready to go. All right, so now I have all of my thunders and my thunder cues set up down here. Now, you might have a problem. Let me open up my thunder cue and play it. Sometimes what will happen is you'll get a sound set up in here, and it'll sound really good. And then when you go to play it in your world, it'll sound really tinny. It sounds like you're listening to it through a metal tube. One of the things that you need to do, or a quick way to overcome that, and you can do this to all of them or do it to one of them, is there is a setting in the sound cue, and it's down near the bottom. So if you don't have anything selected, you'll see it down here. It says max concurrent play. See if I can open that up a little bit. Max concurrent play count. And what I have found is if it's set to 16, if you go in and set that down to 1, sometimes what'll happen is it thinks it needs to play it multiple times all at once. And I don't know why it does it, but I was having some trouble with this, and I Googled it to see if I couldn't find the solution, and the recommendation was just go into here to playback and set max concurrent play count to 1, and then it solves the problem. So you might want to, I don't think that I can actually recreate it if I set that back to 16, which is default. I don't think it's going to do it, but it's really jarring when it happens because it sounds, it's got this weird, sound coming through a metal tube, and it's loud and it's really, really jarring. So I just went in and set these all to 1, and everything worked fine after that. So I'm going to say that problem has been solved in case you run into it. And it is really annoying when you're waiting patiently for 30 seconds for the sound of a particular thunder, and then you get that weird jarring tinny sound to it. It's kind of like, well, what the hell happened? And you got to go back and try and figure it out and fix it. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. You want to set your max concurrent play count to 1. All right. Now the next step I'm going to do is I need to go in and I actually want to set up some lighting. And we're going to be doing the lightning is going to be a light bulb that we're going to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and I've got a folder all set up of all of my assets, and I've already got one in here. But I'm going to go ahead and create another one so I can show you how it works. And I'm going to right click down here, and I'm going to create a new blueprint class, and the one I'm going to go for is actor. And then I'm going to go up here and I'll track that thing down where it added it in. We'll call it BP Lightning Tutorial. And then I'm going to double click and open this up. Okay. Now, there is a handout that goes with this, so you can follow along with it when it's going. One of the things I'm going to do here, or the thing I have to do, is I need to add my light bulb into it. So I'm just going to go in and add a point light here into this, and I'm going to replace that default sphere that's there. I don't want to see that. And then I'm going to change the name of this to lightning, just so it makes a little bit more sense of the stuff that I have to do. Right, now, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to have control over this. What I would like to have is I would like to have lightning that I have. The reason I'm making it a blueprint is because I want control over it. I want to be able to take an object and place it in my scene and have multiple controls over it. I would like to control how frequently it goes off. I would like to control the color of it as it goes off. I would like to control the brightness of the light. If you know anything about lightning and about thunder, the way that it works, light travels at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. The speed of sound is about 720 miles per hour. And so basically what happens is when you see a flash of lightning, you see that long before you can hear the sound of the thunder, and it's usually a couple of seconds. It's about 2 seconds off. And basically the way that you can figure out how far away lightning is, it's about 1.9 miles per second. So if you see a flash and then 2 seconds later you hear the sound, that means that lightning bolt was about 4 miles away. And if you see a flash and hear it immediately, that means it's really close to you, because it's traveling so fast. So it might be within a half a mile or a quarter mile of where it was. So where the flash is going to determine how long the sound is before it happens. But I don't want to place 30 different lights in my scene to control this. I'd like to be able to put maybe 2 or 3 of these blueprint lights in my scene, and then I'm going to be using blueprint and the sound cues to set it up so each time it flashes, it does it randomly. The brightness is random, so it might seem closer in one flash and further away on another one. The sound of the thunder will vary, so maybe this particular one is further away and this particular one is closer. It'll also vary which sound that it plays as it goes. It's going to be a fairly complex thing, and I'd like to have all those controls set up and actually in the details panel of my editor back over here on the right. I'd like to have it all appear over here so I have some controls over those things. So in order for me to do that, first thing I'm going to have to do is I need a couple of additional variables. I'm going to have to set some variables up here. So let me do a basic setup. There's my light. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the attenuation. I'll leave the intensity. I'm going to leave the intensity at 5,000, I think. I'm not going to make any change to that. I'm going to set the attenuation to 50,000. All right. And we'll do that. And then what I'm going to do is I need to go in and create a couple of variables so that I have them all set up and ready to use. So the first one I'm going to do down over here is I'm going to go ahead and click my little variables button. And I need to get one that's not listed in here. And you can see I've got Boolean, byte, integer, float, name, transform, rotate, all those things. And there are some in here that deal with light. So I'm going to search for one, and I'm going to call it linear. You can type linear color. And there's going to be a linear color variable right here. And it's going to come in as a dark blue. And I'm going to name that linear color. We're going to call this one light color. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the button that says editable. Now you'll notice there's a little eyeball over here on the left. Whenever you have a variable, you have a little eyeball here. What that means is it is editable. Okay. So if it's editable, that means it's going to appear in my details panel over on the side. Then what I'm going to do is, if you'd like to, you can type in a tooltip. You can type in here set light color. You don't have to really do that because I think light color pretty much, that's what's going to show up. That pretty much tells you, but this is what's going to happen when you hover the mouse over it. So you can add in a tooltip or not. That's about the only one I'm going to add in, I think. The rest of them will be self-explanatory. And then down here under category, what I want to do is I want to keep all of my settings that I'm going to have. I'd like to have them all be together. Like you see sound over here, and I've got all these little things here in sound, and attenuation. I've got all those things under an attenuation heading. That's what this category will do. So by default, there's going to be a default category in here, or it'll create a default category. And then it'll put everything in there, but I want it to be specific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the word default. And I'm going to type in lightning. And what it's going to do is it's going to now, eventually, when I put it in there, it will create a lightning category. And it's going to give me a light color balance in there. So it also has created over here on the left side of my screen under variables, it's created a lightning group. And it says light color. So I'm going to compile this real quick and save it up. And I'm going to pull this off the screen here. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag one of these out here into my world so you can see what it's just done. Okay? So over here on the right side of my screen, I now have a subheading called lightning. And then there is that little color bar that you see right here. I can open this up. And I have the ability to put in RGB colors. Now, by default, that came in as black. And that's probably not what you're going to want. A black light means it doesn't give off any light at all. So it's going to appear to not work. Okay? So let's open this thing up and see if I can go in here and set that up. And there really isn't anything that I can do. Click on that. There it is. There really isn't anything that I can do in that particular light color thing here. So what you're going to have to remember to do is every time you add that light, you're going to want to click on this and set that light to show up. So it's going to have to be set to be white. So you're going to want that thing back over here like that. And that's going to be an important thing to remember. If you're trying to do it and you can't figure out why the light's not flashing, when we get it all set up, it's probably because you did that. On there, I'm sorry, the value's right there. You can go into the value here, and you can click on that, and you can say, go ahead and let's set that to white. And then that way, every time I use that, compile it and save it, that's going to be my default color over here. So if I add a second one in, I'm going to get that white color. So make sure you do that down here. I don't know, I wasn't seeing it there, but make sure you click on that and make that white, so that sets your default color. Now, if you don't want it to be white, you want it to be gray or light blue or something like that, that's usually, lightning is a fairly bright white color. And by the way, when you see this, we're going to really explode the brightness of this thing. We've set the intensity of this particular light to 5,000. That's about the equivalent of a 100-watt light bulb. Now, lightning is way more powerful than that, and you're going to see I'm going to have to step that up probably to 300,000 or 400,000 in order to simulate lights, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to do that actually using a timeline and get some blueprint in there to handle all of that. So anyway, I have my light color variable. I'm now going to need a different variable. The one I'm going to want for this one is going to be enable by default. There might be times when you don't want a light to work and you want to be able to turn it off or turn it on and not have to come back in, open up this window and select the light and then come down here and say, oh, let's do visible and turn it off. There are going to be times when maybe you want some controls out over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another variable here. And this one is going to be a Boolean, because a Boolean is a on-off or true-false statement. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to type in enable by default. I'm going to make that editable, so if I want to turn it off, I can. And then under my category down here, if I go to the drop-down, I'm going to have the word lightning is going to be right there. So you can select lightning, and now that's going to be, if I compile it, that's now going to be part of my thing out over here. All right. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to check that, make sure it's set to enable by default, and then it's turned on. So by default, the light is turned on. And then if you don't want that light to work, you can always go back in and you can uncheck that and it'll turn that light off, and you don't have to come back into your edit window here and deal with it. The other one I'm going to add in here is going to be a float variable. And you notice over here again, it's been added in under lightning. I'm going to add in a float variable. A float variable is going to give me the ability to type in numbers and to do some things with that. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to set the brightness of the light, because I'm probably going to want that to be a little bit different in here. So I'm going to check that to be editable, and I'm also going to make sure that that's part of my lightning category. And that gets a little annoying. Every time you move the mouse, you're going to get that, and it kind of obstructs your view. But if you just click on that and then pull it away, you'll see you have lightning down below. And then I've got my light color, my enable by default, and my brightness are all set up here and ready to be used. And by compiling it and saving it, I now have that ability out over here. And you notice brightness is turned off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'll set my brightness to 5,000 because that's what I wanted as the default. And so there it is. Now, I'm probably going to come back and change that here in a second, but for right now, that will work. It also helps me to see it in the scene while it's there. Okay, now setting up the blueprint. We've talked a little bit about a construction script, and I've mentioned when we were doing this before, your event graph is where we're going to be doing all of our blueprint work. I'm going to remove all of those things. This is where we're going to do all of our work. Okay, all of the stuff that you see in here, and actually this should kind of come before construction script when you stop and think about it, because there's my viewport, and it shows me what I have. This is my event graph. This is where I'm going to do all my blueprinting. And the construction script is literally, at this point, this little purple box is going to be comprised of everything I do in here. So this is, think of that as a shortcut. And that's the way it works. But what I want to do is I actually want to come in and I'm going to alter this just a little bit because there are some things that I need to have control over. I've added these elements out over in here, light color, enabled by default, and brightness, and I've set them all up and they're all visible in my editor. But strictly speaking, they don't work just yet in terms of my blueprint. And I want these things to be able to work in my blueprint, and I want them to be become options. I want these to be options that are included in my blueprint, because I'm going to be setting the intensity. I'm going to be setting the brightness. I'm going to be changing the light color. I'm going to be turning it on and off by default. I need to have some controls of that inside of my event graph. And in order to do that, I have to add them into this construction script as an add-on. These are going to be add-ons to work with my basic event graph. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a copy of my lightning. So I have it. Now, how did I get that? We've done this before. If you just grab a hold of it and pull it out, you're going to have a choice of get or set. Get is basically just an identifier. If I select get, it's going to pull out a representation of the lightning. So if I want the lightning to do something or be attached to something, it will be. If I pull this out and I select set, then what I have is I have the ability to change the way that lightning is going to be working in conjunction with other things. And that's really not what I want. So what you can do as a way of a shortcut is if you hold the control key, and I'm holding my control key down and left click and drag, I don't have to make that decision. I don't have to it took me a long time, as stupid as it sounds, it took me a long time to remember whether I wanted get or set. After all, there's only one letter difference. But I could never remember which of the two was going to do it. And then when I realized if I hold the control key down, I don't have to think about it. And so I know it does sound stupid, but that works for me. I'm going to do the same thing with the other three here. I'm going to pull out a light color and drop it in there. There we go. That took a second longer than I thought it would. Enable by default, we'll bring that one out, and then we'll also bring out a brightness. And we'll just sort of get them set up down here and space them out evenly. It doesn't really matter. I've found, for me, that sometimes these things bother me because the snap to the grid, I don't know why some things don't line up. I don't know why I guess it's centered. It's not snapped to one corner or the other, and that always bothers me. All right, so first thing I'm going to need is I want to be able to set the light color. These are my three variables down here. Lightning is the actual object, the name of the object I'm going to be changing. These are the three variables that are going to change that object. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go in, I'm looking for a set light color. So I'm going to get my set light color. Oops, that's not the one I want, sorry. All right, and you'll notice it says set light color lightning. Now I had you bring these four things out and drop them in here. This is going to get to be a little bit annoying because of the way that it works, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. And I'm just going to say okay, and it's going to bring in, and it's going to have a lightning attached to it. That is the same lightning as this one up over here. It's the same as that one there. I'm just going to delete that and put it right in here. And every time for each of these following things, it's going to do the exact same thing, but I don't need that lightning attached to it. So I've got a set light color. Then I'm going to look for a set visibility. And again, it's going to deal with the lightning. So it's going to try to bring it in, and I'm just going to delete that lightning, and I'll have set visibility. The last thing I'm going to do is going to be the brightness, and this is going to be a set intensity. And again, it's going to come in with the lightning, and I don't want that lightning. I'm just going to delete that. So there are my three controls that I have. Make that a little bit bigger. Sometimes I'll close down this compiler window down here, so I have a little bit more room there. You can only zoom in so far. That's as far as I can go. Okay, so here's how this works. First of all, my construction script has to be wired to the first one. You can do these in any order. Don't feel like this is the specific order that it has to be done in. What becomes important is what is wired to what, not where those things are when they're wired. All right, so construction script is just wired into the first one of these. Now, lightning is the target in every case. Each one of these things you'll notice has a target. So when we say set the light color, what are we talking about? Set the light color for what? We're setting it for lightning. I'm setting the visibility. What am I setting the visibility for? The lightning. And then the last one down here, the intensity. The intensity has to do with the lightning. So each of these three things is now wired to affect that light. Now these variables down over here represent those amounts or those objects that I have out over here. So in this particular case, the light color is wired to the new light color of the light color node. And enable by default is wired to the new visibility of the set visibility, and brightness is wired to the new intensity. Now, if I break that link, I want you to notice that there's the ability to type in an amount right there. Now, my brightness over here, I've got it set to 5,000 by default. So if I look at this back screen over here, it says brightness 5,000. Okay. If I just use this set intensity, I can type in 5,000 and get the exact same effect. Okay. But what happens is if I ever decide to change it, I have to come back to here to do it. And that was the whole point of adding this thing out over here in my details panel, so I don't have to keep returning in here and digging into the blueprint to find every little change that I need to make. I want them to be visible and out over here. So that's kind of what I've done. So by wiring this up, that 5,000 amount goes away. It's not even there attached to it anymore. It's gone. And I have this little brightness node, and that means that this element out over here that you see in your details panel is what is going to be controlling that. This is that, and whatever amount I type in here is going to affect the intensity of that light. I compile that, and I'm going to save it. So now at this point, we're ready to actually go in and work on the blueprint and get the blueprint all set up and ready to go. Now this is a little bit of a long one. There are a lot of elements that are going to go in here. I think what will happen is you'll start to see a pattern. Because I want to have the same randomness that I have the ability to set. I want minimum and maximum values. I'm going to be creating a whole bunch of different variables as we go through this one. They're almost all floats. So I'm going to have a whole bunch of those green ones over there, and they're all going to be under my lightning category. And it's going to give me the ability to set minimum and maximum delay times for the light flash, minimum and maximum amounts for the delay for the restart of the system, because we don't want the lights to go off once. We want them to reset and go off multiple times, but still have random amounts built into them. And I'm also going to have the ability to throw some sound effects in there, because I'd like to have some sounds be in here. So let's go over here and let's look at our event graph. And I've deleted everything that's in here. I would recommend that you do the same thing. You kind of want to delete all of the stuff that's going to be in here, so we can kind of see what's going to happen. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate the light flash. So I'm going to right click in here, and I'm going to go right to the very bottom, and I'm going to get an add timeline. And we'll go and take a look at it. We've used these before. We did this when we opened up the door using Blueprint. We're going to do our keyframes a little bit different in here for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name this one. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a name of, let's call this light flash. Yeah, make sure I get the whole thing highlighted. We'll call that light flash. You can call it kind of whatever you want. And then I'm going to double click on it to open it up. And so I get this little window, and we've seen this before. There's nothing in here. I'm looking for a float track. So I'm going to click the little F+. This is going to give me that amount. And I'm going to go ahead and name this thing intensity, because I'm doing that because that's literally what I'm going to be controlling in here. I'm going to make that light flash on and off. And the intensity is going to be part of what that is involving. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and name it what I'm naming it. Now, I'm going to go in, and what do I need to change? I'm going to leave everything kind of the way it is in here. It's 5 seconds long, but I'm only going to be using about 3/4 of a second. If you think about the flash on a bolt of lightning, the intensity is really bright, and the flickering is very quick and very short. You don't get a 5-second blast of lightning. You get a split-second flash of lightning. So I'm going to be going in, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to left click again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the first spike of the flashing of the light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first one here, and I'm going to set the beginning at 0, and I'm going to set the value at 0. Now, what this is going to do is this, regardless of what I have the brightness set on my light, because I'm going to be using the timeline here to control the flash of the light, by setting the value to 0, I am in effect turning the light off. Let me see where I am time-wise on this one. This is about an 0.8 of a second. Well, I'm going to actually do the entire, flashing in that space of time. So I'm going to grab this and kind of pull this over here like this, and I'm going to grab that and pull it back into here. I'm going to set the value of this one at 0 also. That turns the light back off. And that's at 0.17. Let's make that, I'll make that 0.15. All right. So the value on that is 0. The value on the first one is at 0. The value on this one I'm going to set to 50,000. And if you think that's bright, that ain't bright. And I'm going to do that, and then it's going to look kind of weird here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shrink this up so I can see the entire thing. So basically it starts out off and it shoots up to 50,000 and then dies back out again. And what I'd like to do with this is I'm going to take that spike and I'm going to maybe take the time over here and we'll maybe make that 0.05. So it's kind of over like that. It's almost an instantaneous on. Within 500ths or 5,000ths of a second, it shoots up to 50,000 and then it dies out. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hold the Shift key and I'm going to add in 2 more. And I'm going to take the value of this. I'm going to make sure the value is set to 0 because, I'm sorry, there's my value for 0. I'm going to set the value on this one. I don't want it to shoot up to 50,000 because I kind of want the flash, the first flash is going to be the brightest. The second and third flashes are going to taper off, and then I'm going to get a 4th blast at the end. So I'm going to take and set the value of this one to maybe 35,000 or 350,000, excuse me. No, it was 35,000. All right, and then I'm going to make sure that the value on this is maybe 0.18. I'll leave it at 0.18. That's fine. And then the value back over here should come back down to 0. Now you'll notice that it looks like it's sitting on the line, but according to that, the value is 834. And this is why you have to be very careful about doing these things when you're setting these things up, that you really literally need to select a keyframe and make sure that it is set to 0 if it's supposed to be off. Because if I didn't, it would go on, off, on, and then just almost go off, but not quite go off. And that's not what I want. I want it to literally flash on and off. So the scale of this is so out of whack. The fact that this is 50,000 up here, it's going from 0 to 50,000. That means that a slight bump off that line sets it at almost 1,000. It's pretty high there. So I want to make sure that if I click on that one, I want to make sure that that goes back down to 0. Okay. And I got this spike and a fall off, and I think maybe I'll take that and make that 0.16. I'm looking for a flash off, and we'll go from there. So this one over here is still set to 0. That's at about 1/4 of a second. So that's kind of about where I want to be for the first 2 flashes. But I'm going to add 2 more. And this one I'll grab and pull up, and just to kind of give you an idea where we are, I'll adjust that to be about 2.26. Okay, and the value on this one I'll set at 25,000. So I've got big spike, littler spike. And then make sure that this one over here is set to a value of 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip a gap here. And I'm going to add in 3 of them. Okay. This last one over here, I want to make sure the value is set to 0, not negative. I want to make sure this one is set to 0, not negative. And this one I'm going to set to 50,000. So I get a little spike like that, and then I'm going to kind of tip it back so it does this. And this last one, that's 0.4. I'm going to make sure that's set back to 50,000. And then the very last point over here, that's at 0.469. That's about a half a second. I think what I'll do is I'll take that and we'll set that to about 0.6. So it tapers off like that. So I'm running a little less than 3/4 of a second on that. Make sure that that value is set back to 0. There we go. So it's going to flash, 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 and then wait, and then flash again. Now you can, if you're not sure, if you can't remember, you can select all 5 of those at once. You'll see it says multiple values. You can, at that point, go in there and change all of your values to 0 in case you're a little bit out of whack. You can do it that way and get it all set up. But I think that particular flash is going to work pretty well for what it is that I want it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that and save it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the length of this thing down to 1. I'm really only concerned about 1 second. And the reason for that is, and we talked about this a little bit with when we were dealing with the timeline and we're opening and closing a door. The length of a timeline is important because it prevents things from happening until the timeline runs its course. Okay, now there's 2 things that you can do in here to adjust that. One of them is you can set the length. I can go in there and say, well, what's the last keyframe on this one? The last keyframe is at 0.6. I can go in and say, let's set this to 0.6. And it'll bring it up like that, and it'll go ahead and that's now a sequence. And so if let's say I left that at 5 seconds, and then I'm doing my blueprints, and I want the light to go off at random times. So the light goes off, and then randomly it's supposed to go off again 3 seconds later. But it's a 5-second animated timeline. So I'm telling it that after 3 seconds it's supposed to go off again, and yet it's still running through a 5-second timeline. So it screws everything up. So what you want to make sure that you do is either you set this to be the length of your animation or near the end of your animation. Like 1 second would have been fine because I'm not going to have any delays that are a second or less. So 1 second would have worked. Or what you can do is you can just check the button that says use the last keyframe. And what that says is that no matter how many keyframes you have in here, the last one is the end of the animation. Whether this is set, this could be set to 600. It doesn't really matter. It's only going to run it to the last animation, and then it resets and waits to be run again. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. If you're not sure what those 2 things are doing up there, that's what it is. The length can be, I can set this back to 5 if I want to. As long as I have use last keyframe checked, that means it's going to go boom, 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 done, and then it's ready to go again if it's called for. So that's compiled, that's saved, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll close that back down, and we'll go back here to our event graph. All right, so there's my light flash. Now, you really can't see it. There's no way to test that out at this point. If you would like to see it, you just kind of have to know that this is what it's going to do. We need to get a few more elements in here before you can see it. And I think what I'm going to do is here in a moment, I'm going to get it set up in such a way that you will be able to see it. And then you can go back and make an adjustment to it from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come to the beginning over here, and I'm going to, first thing I'm going to add is an event begin play. And so now what happens is as soon as the game spawns, we'll compile that, nothing is going to happen. There's my light. I'll get it close to the ground so you can kind of see it right there. And if I hit play, nothing happens. All right, and that's because that while this is set to go, if I hit play, you can see that that's what's happening, but the flash is not being displayed. I have it flashing, but there's nothing attached to this to tell it what to do. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a few more things in here. Now, if I came out of the back end of this thing and said, let's do this. Let's go ahead and we're going to right-click and we're going to set intensity. And this is where that lightning is important. It does come in. I'm going to go ahead and plug that into there. Whoops. Try that again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug that into there. And then I'll bring the intensity over. Well, it's not going to do it. Let's take this and wire. I'm going to pull that up so it's out of the way. I'm going to wire this intensity over to that. Okay. Now at this point, we should be able to see the light flash. So let's see what happens if we go to play. Yep, that worked. Okay. Now you'll notice you got to watch it fast. It flashes. Okay. So it's working. I know that it's working. Maybe I can go back and say, come back into here and double click on it. Maybe I'd space that out just a little bit more if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to leave it the way it is. It kind of works fine for what I'm doing. It's nowhere near bright enough, but I'm not worried about that because I'm actually going to do something completely different for that. All right. But here's what bothers me the most out of it. And that what bothers me the most out of it is that it happens instantaneously. And I don't even get a chance to notice that it's happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a delay. So I'm just going to pull a wire out of here and I'll type in delay. And we'll get that. And then that comes in already wired up. If you do that, basically if you've got two elements that are wired together and then you pull a wire out of the where it's already wired up and say I want a delay, it usually just goes ahead and drops it right in there. And I'm going to go into the delay and I'll set this thing for 2. And let's just see how that looks at that point. We'll compile it and save it. And we'll bring it over and we'll take a look and see. Now it's going to go 1, 2, boom, and it flashes and fires. Sweet. All right. Now, while that works, that's really not what I want either. Because that means that what it's going to do is it's going to play, and it's going to wait 2 seconds, and it's going to flash. And then that may not be what I want. I don't want the flash to go off within 2 seconds every time. Now, what I'm going to be doing eventually is we're going to look, and we haven't done this before, but when I have an entire blueprint sequence, I'm going to need it to finish playing, because this entire blueprint sequence I'm going to create here is designed to do something once. Oh, that's because I'm still running. It's designed to do something once. So this is designed to flash that light once, and then it shuts off because that's all it's told to do. Begin play, delay for 2 seconds, flash the light. This is what controls it. This tells it what light is flashing. Boom, it's done. But if I said I would like to have this string be restarted again by wiring out of the end of this thing and bringing it all the way back to the beginning of that, you notice there isn't one over here. This event begin play is a one-time deal. As soon as the game spawns, everything spawns, start doing everything. I can't come back and wire it into that, but I can come back and wire this into delay. I can get multiple things wired into delay. So I do have a wire. If I pull this away, you can see it. I do have a wire that's attached back to the beginning here. And so what happens is, and I'll just do it right here so you can kind of see what happens. We'll run this, and it's going to wait 2 seconds. It's going to fire, and then it's going to reset back to the beginning. It's going to wait 2 seconds, and it's going to fire, and it's going to reset back to the beginning. I pull this away. Is it going to do it? No, let me get out of there and go back and do it again. Flashes. Yeah, that's not really working because there's other things that I have to do to it. I've got other elements I'm going to have to add it into this. But just know at the end, that's kind of what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and break that link to the delay. Okay. Now, I don't want that 2 second. And it would basically, here's what would happen. It would delay 2 seconds, play the flash, brighten it up, go back to the beginning, wait 2 seconds, play the flash, and then just repeat it every 2 seconds. And that's not how lightning works. What I'd like to have is a random delay. Now, if I'm doing a random delay, what I'm going to need is I'm going to need to have some random settings. So I really want a minimum delay and a maximum delay. So I'm going to create 2 more variables, and they're both going to be floats. And I'm going to name the first one minimum light delay. I'm going to make it editable, and I'm going to make sure that it's added to the lightning category. All right. And I'm not going, even if I compile this thing, it gives me the ability to put an amount in here. I'm not going to enter an amount. I'm going to leave that blank because I'd like to have absolute control over it over here. I want each light will be handled individually. I don't want any values in here at all. But I've got minimum light delay. It's float. It's editable, and it's part of the lightning category. And then I'm going to add a second one over here. And this is also going to be a float. Whatever you did last, by the way, comes in as the next one that you do. This is going to be max light delay. It's also going to be editable, and it's also going to be part of the lightning. And I'll compile that, and I'll save it. And so now if I look over here, I now have minimum light delay and maximum light delays out over here. And you can see why I'm not doing tooltip, because that's pretty much self-explanatory. And if you don't do anything, it just tells you exactly what you're looking at. So I got these 2 more variables over here. What I want to do is I want to bring them both in. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm just going to click and left click and drag these 2 things out here. And in order to hook, I can hook those up to the duration, but what I'd like is I need some sort of a random setting in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to type in random float in range. To be able to spell. Random float in range. Okay, and it comes in with, again, it gives me some minimum and maximum values that are part of this thing automatically, except if I type those numbers in, they're hardwired into it, and I can't change them out over here on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire these 2 things up. That value is going to go away because this particular value, this variable, is controlling what those numbers are going to be out over here. I don't want to have to type them in there and come back and change them. Okay, so what I have now is I now have the ability to go in and set minimum and maximum light delays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this thing off to the side, and let's go in and say I want a minimum of 3 seconds and a maximum of 5 seconds for that. So it is now going to, when I get ready to do this, it's going to flash anywhere between 3 and 5 seconds. All right. Now, if I stop that and do it again, it could be anywhere up to 5. It could be as little as 3 seconds. Each time it flashes, it's going to go off at a different time, which is kind of what I want. And this is what I was talking about becoming a theme. We're going to be doing this all over the place because I want all kinds of variables in here as I'm going. So I think what I'll do here is let's go ahead and let's set, for right now, let's go ahead and make our minimum brightness 50,000. And let's set the delay in here on this one for right now. We're going to set that to 2, and we're going to set that to 4. Okay, and I can make those changes without having to recompile over here, which is kind of nice. If I made changes in here, I'd have to recompile it and resave it and do all that again. And so now what happens is I've got that value is 50,000. And you'll notice it's not really doing much there. The difference between 5,000 and 50,000, actually not much. It's a difference between a 100 watt bulb and a 500 watt bulb. So there's really not much going on there. So I need to be able to do some things later on. And so let's take care of that right now. What I'd like is I'd like that light to be a whole lot brighter. So I'm going to pull these 2 things apart right here. And what I would like to do is I would like to have the ability to take my brightness numbers over here and really jack them up. Now, when we're controlling the brightness on something, and I think as you've worked through Unreal, you may have noticed how difficult it is to figure out exactly how bright something is supposed to be. There are some lights that you have to set 5,000 is bright enough. There are other lights that 250,000 doesn't seem bright enough. And then sometimes you're into like 10 or 100 or 100,000ths of a fraction for a light to be able to control it. So one of the things that we like to do in here is that if I'm going to jack that light up, I need it to be bright, and I don't want to have to guess at things. Well, 50,000 doesn't seem to be bright enough. So what I would like to do is I would like to put a multiplier in here. So no matter what I put in there, it's going to multiply it, say, by 1,000 times. That would be so much easier to do, and that way I don't have to think about it. I know that if I set that to 500,000 or 50,000, I multiply it by 1,000, that's going to be a whole lot brighter, and I don't have to think about it. And it's basically just my way of going in and jacking those numbers way up. So the way that we do that is we have a particular type of a node in here. It's called a float, and then we're going to go times float. So it's a little star asterisk in here. Float times a float. So the intensity is a green node. It's a float node. And remember, that's something that's a decimal. So 0.00000 is a decimal. Okay, and it's going from float to a float, but it's multiplying the two together. And you'll see in here you have integer times float, you have float times float, or vector times float. And in fact, if you looked at the math in here, you would actually find there's a whole bunch of them in here. You can almost always do a divide or an add or a minus, or so add or subtract or multiply or divide or whatever you want to do. So I'm going to go for the float times the float, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wire that up to this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the multiplier in here times 1,000. All right, and we're going to compile that. Now watch what happens to that light when it goes off. Intense. That was an intense flash, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, because I've got a large amount of attenuation on my light. If I can do this and like get away, okay, it lights up quite a big area, which is kind of what I want. I want that flash to simulate what is going on in there. Now I could theoretically, in fact I'll do it here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, look, 1,000 is nice, but what if I had a variation on that one? What if I took these things over here? Wait for that to catch up. There we go. I'm going to bring this over here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wire that into that. And what I would like to do is I'm going to create, and then this isn't in the handout, I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what happens. I'm going to add another variable in here. It's going to be another float, and what I'm going to call this one is minimum brightness. And we'll make that editable, and we'll put that in Lightning. Okay. And then I'm going to create one that says maximum brightness. Now I've already got a brightness back over there, but I can do this and it's not really affecting those over there. Let's go ahead and do a max brightness. And we'll set that to be lightning. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and compile that so I have access to it. And what I'm going to do with my minimum brightness is I'm going to set my minimum brightness to, let's do 750 for the minimum. And for my maximum, I'm going to do 1,000. All right, and I'm going to compile that. So then I'm going to bring these out here. I'm going to say minimum brightness, holding the control key, maximum brightness, and we'll wire that into this one, and we'll wire that one into that one. And now what I have is I've got, compile that and save it. Let's pull it over to the side over here. And so now I've got this minimum and maximum brightness. They're already pre-calculated. I might want to change those by light. Maybe I'd like to have one be different. But the nice thing about this is that every time that that thing goes off, it's now going to go in and give me a random value. out of that. And so sometimes it's going to be a little bit brighter than others. And this is what we want. We're looking for the ability to create a completely random world. So I've got this thing set up and ready to go. All right. Now, what I need to do next is I would like to have a sound play at that particular location. So my flash is working. Everything is set up here in terms of my flash. What I would like to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and I need to play a sound. So I'm going to pull a node out or wire out of here, and we're going to say play sound at location. Okay. So it brings this thing in, and it says it gives me the ability to select the sound that I want to play. And it gives me the ability, if I want to go in and put in a location, I can do so. Now, if I wanted it to be random locations, this opens up, by the way, you can see there are other things that are going on in here. I can change the pitch. I can change a lot of different things that are in here in terms of the sound, but I'm going to let the sound cue do all of that. The one thing that is kind of off the beaten path in terms of something that you might not really think about is the sound right now. It says play sound at location. So right where this blueprint is, that's where the sound is going to play. But if you've got all of this randomness set up in your scene, you might consider going in and saying, well, maybe there's a random float in range. Is there a random location? And there isn't, but I can probably go in and say, look, what those particular, that's going to be a vector. So let's go back in and say random vector. And I can do, I don't know if it's going to do it or not. Nope, that's not going to do it. But I should be able to go in. I'll have to hunt it down. I'm sort of riffing on this thing here, but that you can be able to go in and play a random location as well. This is going to play specifically where that thing is. You can also have it give off sound at a random location. Sometimes the thunder is to the left of you. Sometimes it's to the right of you. Those kinds of things. And I don't really have a random location for my light flash. That's always going to go off where it is. But I can play the sound at a different location. All right? So what I'm going to do now is the sound, I'd like to have the ability to change the sound on the fly. Go ahead and compile that. I'd like to be able to maybe say, look, sometimes I want, I can take this several ways on what sound I want to play. One, I can tell it to play a specific sound. I can say, let's click on this select asset, and we'll go in there and we'll say hunt for a particular sound. So I can say it's going to be Thunder 04. And there's my Thunder 04 cue, and now that's going to play that there. So if I compile that off to the side here and go back and play it, that's what it does. Okay, so it's playing that specific sound. Well, what if I don't want that specific sound and I don't want to have to come back in here and I don't want to change it? Well, what I can do is, rather than actually say play that specific sound, is I can pull a wire out of here and I can say promote to variable. And by promoting to variable, it's going to create a new variable here. And I'm going to go ahead and change that, the name of that variable, to play sound. I'm going to make it editable, and I'm also going to make it part of the lightning category. And so now what I have is I've got this new variable over here, and what that does is this adds the ability, let me compile that, it's going to add the ability for me to do that over here. Now, by default, it's going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and clear that slot so I have complete, I don't want to play one and then I want to specifically go in and select one. So I'm going to set that so it's none, and I'll compile that again. So basically, I have the ability to go in and add a sound. Now, that would work. I can go in now and say, click on this, and I can pick any one of the sound files that are in there, the sound cues that are in there. But I can even take that a step further, because what I can do, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this off to the side for a moment, is I can go back into my sound folder here, and I can say, look, let's create a new sound cue. I'll start with the Thunder 01, and I'm going to create a cue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one All Thunder _ cue. All right, so I've got that is in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to get all of the other thunders. So Thunder 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06. And I'm going to bring them all in here and I'm going to drop them in. Make that a little bit bigger. And we'll pull those and drop them right underneath that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a wire out of here and I'm going to go in and I'm going to get random. And I'm going to wire the random into that. All right. And then I'm going to say, well, I only have the ability to add one more, but I do have the ability to add more inputs. So we'll add in a total of 6 inputs, and we'll bring them all over like this. And now what it'll do is every time I click the play, it plays a different sound of thunder. And I'll save that up. All right, so now I don't have any attenuation set on that, and I do need to go in and work on that a little bit more. So my All Thunder cue, by the time I get done, is I would probably take each one of these things back here. All right, and I would add in there maybe to each of them, give them their own custom attenuation. So they're all playing a little bit different attenuation. I can get that all set up. What I can also do is I can then randomize the modulation. So I can pull modulation out of here, modulator, and pull that over to here. Or I can put them, maybe put the modulation before that, and then it'll randomize it and say, look, let's do that. So each one of those thunders sounds a little bit different. So if I have different attenuation on all of them, I'll delete that for right now. But if I have the modulation put in there, and I've got a random range on that, it's a deep rumbling. What it's doing is it's not only playing random thunder, but each time it does it, it randomly modulates it. So I can say, let's do some of these at 0.75, and maybe some of these at 1.2. And now I'm going to get a pretty good range of that. And I can also go ahead and say the same thing with the sound. Let's go in and say some of these sounds, let's make them 0.75, and let's make some of these 1.5. And what it's going to do is every time it plays a sound, it's going to play with the pitch, and it's going to play with the volume, and I'm going to have no two, even though I've got 6 different thunders in here, the fact that it's going to play each of them completely different every time it plays them gives you the sense of there's not just 6 types of thunder, there's thousands of types of thunder going on. So I'm going to go ahead and save that up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here, and that play sound, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add my All Thunder cue onto that. So now every time it flashes, it's going to give me a random thunder at a random pitch at a random volume. That's pretty nice. All right. Now, we're almost done. Let's pull, where'd it go? I guess I closed it down. So we'll go back over here to my rain and snow assets and my lightning tutorial. There it is. So we're almost done. Basically what I want to do here is I need to have a delay. Before I play the sound in here, I already talked about how the fact that I like to have a little bit of a delay going on. I'm going to pull this thing up. I like to have a little bit of a delay going on before the sound actually plays. Right now, it flashes, and then it plays the lightning sound right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing I did over here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate that float range and open that up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wire this thing in. So I have Close that up. Pull that over. Going to right click here and let's add a delay. And we'll just interrupt those two things right there with the delay. And I'm going to add a float range in here for that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a sound delay. So what I want to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create two more variables. You can see I got a bunch of them in here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create two new floats. So I'm going to select float. First one is going to become minimum sound delay. It's going to be editable and it's going to be part of Lightning. And then we'll add another one, and that is going to be the maximum sound delay. And you can sort of see how these things start to, they're fairly easy to do, and you get this great control over what you're doing. All right. And I think what I'm going to do for these is I'm probably going to set these fairly short. So I'll pull that off to the side, and I've got my sound delays over here. I think what I'll do on that sound, the sound delay, is I'll give it between 1 and 3 seconds, and we'll see how that works. Make sure I've got this set up right. Oh, that's because I didn't add them in. Duh. All right, so I've got those things over here now, so let's bring them in. And let's wire those up, otherwise it's just going to play like it did, which is immediate. Okay. And we'll compile that, and let's give it a play now. We should have a minimum 1 to 3 seconds after the flash. That's a little bit better. All right, I kind of like the way that one's looking. All right, so I've got a delay in here. That's working kind of what I want, and I'm playing the sound, and that's working the way I want it. This basically the only thing that I have left to do is this is on a single strand. So like I said a second ago, this is playing once all the way across, and while I have all these nice variations in here of minimum and maximum delays, it plays once and then it stops. And I would like it to restart again because I've got multiple sounds in here. I'd like it to play any one of those 6 sounds at any different times. And I'd like to have it do it again. Now, what I did at the beginning was I took that intensity and I wired it back to here, and it wasn't working. And the reason that it wasn't working is because you actually have to have another delay. Okay, I need, what happens is, and I know I've mentioned this before in Blueprint, that the speed of your processor determines how quickly things move through here. And it is literally instantaneous. And this is something I always forget when I'm working in Blueprint. I get so focused on what I am doing. I want the light to flash a certain way, and I want it to be a certain brightness and change that value, and I want it to play this sound. You forget that what happens is it's literally going through that at the speed of light. And this is what's so important about having delays in there. It's not just the randomness of the delay, it's the fact that that's the way you have to slow down Unreal as it attempts to go plowing from A to Z on this line. It wants to do it instantaneously. So the delays that you put in here are more than just the cosmetic delay of waiting to see when the sound goes off or when the light flashes. It literally is you having control over Unreal wanting to just do everything all at exactly the same moment. Right? So if I just take the end of this thing and wire it back to the beginning, what happens is it just goes zip and goes through it again. What I want is I need to have a delay before it goes back to the beginning. So I'm literally going to add one last delay in here. And this one last delay is also going to have a random range. And you see now we've got 4 of these things going on in here. Okay, so I'm going to need 2 last variables, and they're both going to be floats. The first one is going to be called minimum start delay, and we'll make that editable, and we'll add it into my lightning category. And then we'll add one last one that is going to be maximum, or max. And actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that restart. So it doesn't look like something at the beginning. I'll go back and change the other one. Editable, and we'll call that lightning. And then we'll go back to my window over here, and we'll go ahead and we'll just rename that minimum restart delay. And then we'll pull one of those out and stick it in there. And we'll pull one of those out and stick it in here. And again, I'm going to leave those blank because I'd like to have the control over there. And then I think what I'll do is I'll compile that. They're over here. My minimum and maximum restart delays are going to be fairly long. I'm going to say I'm going to do 12 and 18. Because you don't want lightning happening and happening and happening. You want there to be a random delay. So it's like a minimum every 12 seconds. In fact, I think I'll change that to 9. Minimum 9 and maximum 18 seconds. So that's quite a range. What it'll do is then it'll wait 9 to 18 seconds, and then it'll restart the entire sequence all over again. So I know it's dead air time here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch this thing. We're a little over an hour here. I'll compile that. And then let's go ahead and just click the play button and watch what happens. So we have our first delay, then we have the flash, then we have the lightning, then we're going to have another delay at the end, anywhere between 9 and 18 seconds. Then we should see that line reactivate back to the beginning, and then the light will flash again. We'll have a random delay, different sounds, and a different restart delay, and it keeps going over and over and over again, and that's doing pretty much what we want. So let's take that and shrink that back down a little bit, and we got this nice setup here, and it gives us this really nice look. Now what I would suggest is I have so much randomness set up into this thing that I can now use this light multiple times. I don't have to have multiples of them. I don't have to go in and duplicate it and say, look, I've got this lightning bolt. Let me go ahead and copy it, because I don't want them to all run at the exact same speed. Everything about this is random, which means I can put copies of this light anywhere I want to in the world to simulate my flashing, and they're all going to run completely separate from each other. So I can examine my world, and I've shown you how to do the light dome here, the sky dome. I can say, well, look, there's a real dark area out over here. So if my lightning is going to come from somewhere, it's probably going to be coming from this direction out over there. That's where that cloud is probably the darkest. And I've got probably some lightning could occur back over here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Alt key, and I'm going to clone one of those, and I'm going to slide it back over there. And I'm going to make that a little bit, maybe a little bit lower on the horizon, and take this one back over here and maybe make that a little bit lighter. And now if I go back into my scene and I play it, there's one. And I don't know if we'll see the one behind us, maybe on the wall. But they're not running at the exact same speed because there's too many variables built in. So I know that it's all going to function. There we go. And the light on that one wasn't maybe bright enough. So maybe what I want to do on that one is, remember, you've got controls in your scene. So I can come back over there and say, where's my lightning number 2 is back over there. I'm going to pull that up a little bit. And then what I can do is I can look in that and say, look, I've got minimum and maximum brightnesses on that one. Why don't I go ahead and say that's a little bit further away and it's not really lighting it up. Let's say that one's going to be 1,000, and and we'll set that to 1500. And even though it's lighter away, it's still going to light up my world the way I want it, because there is so much randomness built into that blueprint that I can put as many copies of that thing in my world as I want to, and I have complete control over here of maybe that the brightness on that one, even though I'm setting my minimum and maximum brightness in that flash to between 1,000 and 1,500 times that brightness number, I can take that number and I can boost it up a little bit, or I can change the color so it's a little bit more blue, or I can do a lot of different things that are in there, and it's going to give me different thunder every time it goes. So it's really kind of a nice look, a nice feature, in order to make something look as natural as possible. And I like the fog in here because the fog receives the lighting from that, and so you really get a sense of there is a flash going on somewhere in my world. And throughout all, I can hear the splash of the rain. So there's a basic blueprint setup for this. It's a little bit complicated, but I think once you kind of look at it, you can see how it all can come together and how you get this nice variations effect in there. What we're going to show you how to do in the next set of videos is how to go in and add some footsteps. I'm running around, but you can't really hear me walking. It would be nice if I had the sound of maybe some splashing footprints, or just some kind of a walking sound going on in here. So we're going to come back and we're going to set that up for you.